You boys look like a weird heavy metal band.
Yes, we are a band.
Really?
Yeah.
So what do you play?
Symphonic post-apocalyptic reindeer-grinding, Christ-abusing, extreme war pagan Fennoscandic metal.
Right. Really interesting.
What's going on, everyone? DJ Nubis here with you on the Meltdown Radio podcast with another reaction video. This time I'm taking some time to react to a video by Movie Blanket Club called The Top 20 Shark Movies of All Time. Out of the blue, I just saw this in my feed and decided, well, let me go see how they feel about their favorite movies or where they place everything at. And I'll be honest, I can only come up with like 8, and I'll get to that later in the video. But 4 or 5 years ago, I did another video about my top 5 shark movies, and even then, like, I still couldn't get to 10. So just like my werewolf movies, I'm very picky about shark movies. Like, it's not like I can't watch like a dumb shark movie, but a lot of times I'm trying to stay at least somewhat realistic or somewhat logical, at least, you know, within the realm of humanity, I guess. There are some movies that start out very well, and then all of a sudden, like, towards the end, they just get kind of goofy. Like, so think of like The Shallows, right? So 90% of that movie is great, and then you get towards the end, it just becomes very dumb. Which was really disappointing because I thought that at least the idea behind it, like, I much rather had Blake Lively's character at least just find a way back to shore rather than try to like take on the shark like she would in like Jaws or something else. Like, it's a little bit too corny, and they kind of ruined the movie for me when they did that. To me, surviving is about surviving, you know, in the open waters or whatever. So people might be surprised by some of the picks in my own list, but I'm going to be very curious what this video has to say in terms of their own list, because one, you've got 20 selections, and I don't know how you come up with 20 lists. They're going like just from everything, you know, like Sharknadoes and stuff like that. So we'll be interested to see what their list looks like compared to my own. But yeah, let's try to get into this.
The oldest fear in cinema's horror catalog. A creature that existed before trees, that has changed almost nothing in 400 million years, and that the ocean keeps hidden until it is too late to matter. From a single film in 1975, an entire genre was born. One that ranges from masterworks of minimalist dread to glossy blockbuster spectacle, with at least one entry that puts a shark inside a tornado, which tells you something about how large the tent has grown. Today we are counting down our picks for the top 20 best shark movies of all time ranked. Let us begin.
I also will say this, my list, like, there's other shark movies within, say, like a franchise that I do kind of like, but at least with my list right now, as far as the top 8, I kept them to different films. I didn't repeat any type of film within a franchise. So, like, even if you had Sharknado in there, I don't have like Sharknado 2 or 5 or whatever. Like, I kept everything just kind of like one particular shark film, you know what I mean?
Number 20, directed by Anthony C. Ferrante.
There you go.
Sharknado. 2013. There's only one entry on this list that earned its place, not by being good, but by committing so completely to its own absurdity that good and bad cease to be useful categories.
And that's a good point. Now, again, the film is not good. But at the time, I remember Neko and we were just kind of watching something else, and I think it was like a sports program or whatever, and then they kept advertising Sharknado that night, and it just became like a big thing. Like, everybody was seeing it was probably the best promotion you'd ever seen about a made-for-TV film. And so when they promoted Sharknado, it just caught fire and like just went nuts, and people were just enjoying the shit out of it for the absurdity that it is. But it would not make my list of great shark films.
A freak weather event deposits sharks inside tornadoes over Los Angeles, and the film accepts this premise with the same unblinking sincerity a more serious filmmaker might bring to a study of grief. Tara Reid and Ian Ziering play two people who appear neither surprised nor particularly troubled by what is happening, which is the correct response. Sharknado is a sci-fi channel production made for under $2 million that became a genuine cultural phenomenon, not despite its absurdity, but because of it, because there is a specific joy in watching a film that has decided it has nothing to lose and behaves accordingly. We would not ordinarily include a film rated 3.3 on IMDb on a best of list, but Sharknado is not competing in that category. It is competing in its own category, which is the category of films that make you immediately want to tell someone else about them. In our view, that is a form of success that this list would be poorer for ignoring. Number 19, directed by David R. Ellis. Shark Night 3D 2011. The final film David R. Ellis completed before his death, and not the one to use to introduce someone to his work. Snakes on a Plane serves that purpose more effectively, but a film that executes its modest ambitions with the professional competence the genre requires. A group of college students at a Louisiana lake house discover that the surrounding saltwater lake has been deliberately stocked with multiple shark species, and the film proceeds from that revelation with the brisk efficiency of a director who knows his audience and has no interest in wasting their time. Ellis.
I mean, I did see this film, but again, it's one of those films that it's kind of entertaining for what it is, but like it's never gonna make my favorite shark films. Like once I saw it, it was kind of like one and done. There's another shark film called Bait, where the shark gets inside like a supermarket that's been flooded. Now I do have some films that are kind of ridiculous in their own way, but once I go through my list, I'll explain why they actually make my list. So yeah.
Stages the underwater attack sequences with a spatial clarity that many far more expensive productions fail to achieve. And the third act turn, that the sharks were introduced intentionally, is a stronger premise than the film fully realizes. Its primary weakness is structural. A PG-13 rating prevents the film from committing to the consequences that would give the horror genuine weight, and the characters are differentiated just enough to provide a counting mechanism for the audience, rather than people worth mourning. But Shark Night 3D is a solidly built example of disreputable genre filmmaking doing precisely what its audience arrived to see. In our view, Ellis knew his craft, and that understanding is what earns this a place. Number 18, directed by Sean McNamara. Soul Surfer, 2011. The only...
Now, I didn't see this one, but I do know it's based off the real life events of, I think her name's Betty. She was a professional surfer that had a tiger shark take her arm, but she, survived the attack and actually went back and surfed again. So kudos to her. But I never actually sat and watched the film because I think it's more just about her surviving and then coming back in the sport. So like, sure, the shark attack is there, but it's probably a little less about the shark and more about just regaining herself, her confidence, and moving on from the trauma, or trying to, deal with the trauma of losing her arm.
Entry on this list in which the shark attack is not the horror, but the inciting incident, the 3-second event that everything else is a response to. Anna Sophia Robb plays Bethany Hamilton, the Hawaiian surfer who lost her left arm to a tiger shark at the age of 13 and returned to competitive surfing within a month. Soul Surfer is not a shark film in the conventional sense. It is a film about faith, determination, and the specific refusal to accept a diminished version of the life that was intended. Dennis Quaid and Helen Hunt play Bethany's parents with the warmth the material needs, and Rob carries the film's physical and emotional demands with a commitment the role requires, and she fully delivers. Its weaknesses are those of the faith-based sports drama. The inspirational arc can feel schematic and the film occasionally prioritizes sincerity over complexity in ways that flatten what might have been a more textured account. But Soul Surfer earns its unusual position here, not because it is a great shark film, but because the attack it depicts was real. The life it changed was real. And the film treats both with a respect that exploitation of the same premise would not have managed. In our view, it belongs here. Number 17, directed by Sean Byrne, Dangerous Animals, 2025. The most formally unusual.
Can I admit right now, I have not finished watching this film. So a lot of people talk about how great it is, and even some friends that I trust have said it's very good. So I've gotten like maybe 15 to 20 minutes into the film, so I have not even really gotten to all the good stuff yet. But the concept is amazing, but I can't put it in my top 8 right now because I haven't seen the entire film, but we'll eventually get back to it for sure.
Usual entry on this list, a survival horror that crosses the great white with the serial killer genre and finds, in that crossing, something neither genre had generated on its own. Hassie Harrison plays Zephyr, a free-spirited surfer abducted by Tucker, a shark-obsessed boat captain played by Jai Courtney with the committed menace that makes a villain worth the film built around him. Tucker's method is ritualistic. He lures tourists to his cage diving operation and feeds them to the sharks circling his boat. And Zephyr, more resourceful than any previous victim, is the variable he did not account for. Byrne, whose previous horror film The Devil's Candy established him as a director with genuine formal intelligence, handles the boat as a confined space with the spatial clarity that good siege movies require. And the film's best sequences derive their terror from the architecture as much as from the animals below. Its weaknesses include a second act that overcomplicates a premise already rich enough to sustain the film on its own terms, and certain plot developments strain the logic that the first half carefully established. But Dangerous Animals earned an 87% critical approval for a reason. It is better than its premise has any right to be. In our view, Sean Byrne is the most interesting horror director working in Australia right now, and this film is the evidence. Number 16, directed by Jack Shoulder, 12 Days of Terror, 2004. The dramatization of the 1916 New Jersey shark attacks, the real-world series of killings that 60...
Now with this, I think this is like a made-for-TV, either docu-series or whatever about the shark attacks, the New Jersey shark attacks, Matawan Creek and all that, which was the basis of Jaws, of course. I actually own books about this. And I might even have the one with the title of 12 Days of Terror. But either way, like I didn't add any of these into my top 8 because I stuck with mainly just like major motion pictures and stuff like that, or at least direct-to-video type stuff. But, you know, it's fine that they add this in, but this is more kind of dealing with like I wouldn't really call this a movie because it's just really just like a recap of like live events that actually happened in history.
Years later, provided much of the historical foundation for Jaws. 4 people were killed and 1 seriously injured across 12 days of attacks along the Jersey shore, and the incident produced the first sustained public awareness of sharks as a danger to swimmers in American coastal waters. Shoulder's television film approaches the material as a procedural, following the response of local authorities, the medical community, and the press to something that no existing framework could adequately explain. And that register gives the film a grounded quality that distinguishes it from more straightforwardly commercial shark productions. Colin Salmon leads the cast with the measured authority the role demands, and the period recreation, New Jersey in 1916, the texture of a summer resort community confronting something unprecedented, is handled with more care than the television movie budget might suggest. Its weaknesses are those of the form. The restraint that gives 12 Days of Terror its credibility also limits its capacity to generate sustained tension, and viewers seeking conventional horror mechanics will find the procedural approach demanding. But as an account of the real-world events that made Jaws possible, it is a more valuable film than its modest profile suggests. In our view, the history alone earns it a place on this list. Number 15. Directed by Peter Gimbel and James Lipscomb. Blue Water, White Death, 1971. The documentary that made Jaws possible, a film that Steven Spielberg studied closely before production began, and that established the visual grammar of the great white shark as a...
Yeah, I think if I'm correct, if my memory serves me, Spielberg got Ron and Valerie Taylor, who were shark researchers and photographers, to be part of the Jaws set to actually get some live footage of the great white that's actually in Jaws. Obviously, sharks can't act on command, so they had to really rely heavily on the mechanical shark. But Ron had been attacked by a great white some years before while spearfishing, and so ever since then, when he survived that attack, he and his wife have been photography and conservationists for great whites and sharks in general. So I don't know if I ever got to see this film. It's more, again, this is more of like just a study of like them actually showcasing something we hadn't seen really before, except through maybe Jacques Cousteau and some of those History Channel type or Discovery Channel type shows, where they showcase sharks. Like, it didn't really come popular to video sharks in the wild until much later with Shark Week and stuff like that.
Cinema subject 4 years before the film that would make that subject famous. Gimbel and Lipscomb's expedition to film great white sharks in their natural habitat produced footage that no one had captured before. Close encounters with unbaited sharks in open water, the first sustained sequences of a great white in motion, the specific way the animal moves before an attack, and the film's central sequence, in which the crew descends in underfloored shark cages with nothing separating them from the water, is among the most genuinely terrifying footage in documentary cinema. Its weaknesses are those of the form. 1971 documentary conventions can feel dated to modern audiences, more accustomed to contemporary production styles, and the expedition framing is more interesting as context than as sustained narrative.
I will say it is kind of unnerving to watch like that kind of footage in black and white as opposed to color, because it's so gray and dark, and then you have these sharks. So nowadays we have all the clear colored videos and photography out there. So watching something like that in the grainy black and white is really kind of unnerving and spooky at the same time.
But Blue Water, White Death earns its position here as the film that taught cinema what a great white shark actually looks like. And that knowledge shaped everything that followed. In our view, a list of great shark films that does not include this documentary is missing the source. Number 14, directed by Martin Wilson. Great White, 2021. An Australian survival thriller that takes the oldest premise in the shark genre, a small group of people stranded in open water with something below them, and executes it with a physical commitment and a respect for geography that the premise demands. Katrina Bowden and Aaron Jakubenko lead a cast of 5 people whose seaplane has been destroyed off the Australian coast, and the film's central dramatic question, who will make it to shore and what will be left of them, is established efficiently and developed with the bleak logic of a film that understands how this kind of story ends. Wilson directs with a confidence that the modest budget does not immediately suggest.
I didn't really like this film,
The
to be
shark
honest.
sequences, though limited by resources, are staged with enough practical clarity to generate the tension they require. Great White's weaknesses are those of a film working at the edges of what its production can sustain. Certain sequences cannot fully deliver the scale they require, and the characterization operates at the functional level the genre typically provides, rather than the specific level that elevates it. But as a lean, effective survival horror, set in the Australian open ocean, a body of water that does not require embellishment to be frightening, Great White does its job with craft. In our view, that is sufficient for a place here. Number 13, directed by Johannes Roberts. 47 Meters Down, Uncaged, 2019. The sequel that improves on its...
Yeah, so chances are well, if he says this improved, maybe he doesn't have the other 47 meters down. I don't know. But again, this is not a series that I really cared about too much. It isn't necessarily that they're horrible films. It's just like they're just not something I would ever go back to the watch. Just like I love shark movies. Don't get me wrong, but if you're talking about the best of the best and the like, the unicorns of the entire genre, like this just wouldn't be in the list for me.
Predecessor in one specific and important respect. Rather than confining the action to two women inside a shark cage, Roberts expands the geography to an underwater cave system beneath a Mayan ruin, and the spatial complexity of that environment generates a different and more sustained variety of dread. 4 teenage girls on a diving trip find themselves inside a labyrinthine underwater structure, navigating both the architecture and a school of great white sharks that have evolved to hunt in total darkness, blind, sensing their prey by sound and movement alone. The concept of sharks adapted to cave darkness is the film's strongest innovation, and Roberts exploits it with more formal intelligence than the premise might suggest. Its weaknesses are those of a sequel working within genre conventions already well established. The character development is minimal. The logic of the cave system is occasionally subordinated to the requirements of tension, and the film ends with a resolution that not all viewers will feel was earned. But 47 meters down, Uncaged is a more inventive film than its reputation allows, and the cave-adapted shark is one of the genre's more compelling ideas of recent years. In our view, Roberts handles it with real directorial instinct, and that instinct is what puts this here. Number 12, directed by Kimball Rendell, Bait, 2012. The high concept is exactly the kind of idea that produces either a masterwork of low-budget ingenuity or an expensive.
Now, I'll be curious for those that watch this and, in the comments, like as far as we go along in this video here, like I said, Dangerous Animals has gotten like a lot of high praise. So at this point, would you feel like Dangerous Animals right now in this list is like too low compared to some of these? Or do you feel like this guy or this person has it right? I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because now thinking about it, like as much praise as Dangerous Animals has gotten, the fact that it's this low on his list and he's got some of these other ones above it, don't know.
Disaster. A tsunami deposits great white sharks inside a flooded supermarket, and the survivors, strangers with enough interpersonal history between them to generate conflict without much additional establishment, must find a way out without entering the water. Rendell, a veteran of Australian commercial film production, understands that the supermarket setting is both the film's greatest asset and its most demanding constraint. The geography must be established clearly enough that the tension makes sense, and the sharks must remain credible within an environment that is, by any rational assessment, impossible. The film navigates those demands with more craft than the premise suggests. Xavier Samuel leads the cast with the physical commitment the role requires, and the film's best sequences, the car park flooding particularly, demonstrate a director who knows how to stage action within a limited space. Bait's weaknesses are those of a high-concept genre film whose execution cannot always sustain the ambition of its setup, and certain sequences strain both the budget and the logic.
Not to mention,
Sharknado,
whoops,
2013. People whose seaplane has been destroyed. More
Sorry about
formal
that.
intelligence, but Bait is exact.
But you can see it here, right? So this scene here. Now, we've seen this a few times, but this is all coming from basically Deep Blue Sea, basically kind of like introduced this whole like flooding scene. So even if you've seen Deep Blue Sea, you know what I'm talking about. So really, we're not seeing a whole lot of new here. And again, this film is not that great. Again, if you just like dumb popcorn films, it's fine. And, you can just have kind of fun with it for what it is. But I wouldn't put this in a best of list. I think that's why I kind of wanted to react to this video, because I'm very curious how they define what is great and what is not. So even if you were going to include those documentaries like Blue Water, White Death, that to me would even be higher than this, because at least then you're kind of dealing with the real concept of genuine fear. And even though the photography and the videography was a little bit, uh, archaic back then, at least it's still dealing with the kind of like more realistic situations of genuine fear. So yeah.
Exactly the kind of film the shark genre needs. One that asks a genuinely new question and answers it with as much intelligence as it can muster. In our view, the supermarket premise alone earns this a place. Number 11, directed by Ben Wheatley. Meg 2, The Trench, 2023. The second.
Now again, for me, he's probably got Meg in this too, since he has Meg too. But for me, like, I'm not going to add in any films that kind of deals with over the top sharks. So Sharknadoes, the Meg, Sand Shark, Christmas, was it Christmas Jaws or whatever? House Shark, all these films that are like been out the last 15 to 20 years, like they're just not going to make my list of best shark films. Like I have again, I'm going to be a little bit picky and finicky about my list and what I like, but this isn't going to be in that list at all.
An entry in the Megalodon franchise took the unexpected step of hiring
Not
Ben
that I
Wheatley,
didn't enjoy
a director
Meg
whose
for what they
filmography runs
but
from found footage horror to period comedy to political assassination, to direct a Jason Statham creature feature sequel, and the results are as distinctive as that combination of elements suggests. Where the Meg was content to be a cheerfully oversized shark movie, Meg 2 treats the Megalodon as one element in a broader action spectacle that includes underwater corporate villains, multiple apex predator species, and a final act set on a resort beach that commits to its own chaos, with the conviction of a film that has stopped worrying about plausibility and decided to maximize scale. Statham anchors the film with his characteristic physical authority, and Wheatley's direction, particularly in the deep sea sequences, has a spatial clarity and tonal confidence that distinguish it from most franchise sequels. Its weaknesses are those of a production whose ambitions occasionally exceed its coherence. The plotting of the middle act is more complicated than it needs to be, and certain character decisions follow genre logic.
I do like the
rather than
plot
human logic.
of the Meg movies.
But as
I
a
think
maximalist
initially
shark
the plots are
blockbuster
very good. I
that
remember them
actually
being based
delivers
off
on
books as
maximalism,
well.
Meg 2 is better company than its reception suggested. In our view, Wheatley's presence behind the camera makes the difference. Number 10, directed by John Stockwell,
Oh,
Dark Tide,
wow.
2012. John Stockwell has spent more of his career making films in or near the ocean than almost any other working director. Blue
Surprised to
Crush,
see this.
Into the Blue, and Dark Tide form an informal marine trilogy, and that accumulated experience with open water photography gives the film a visual quality that its screenplay does not always deserve. Halle Berry plays Kate Matheson, a shark conservationist and freediver who retreats from open water diving after a colleague is killed, and who is drawn back into South African waters by financial pressure and a client who wants the closest possible encounter with great whites. The film's central sequence, a free dive without a cage, unprotected with real great white sharks, was filmed with actual animals using techniques developed with genuine shark conservationists, and the result is the most visually extraordinary footage in the film.
See, now I didn't know that. So I always assumed that I remember them using some real sharks, but I thought a lot of some of the other stuff was like CGI. So maybe they still did on some level, but kudos to the crew to actually include like real sharks and stuff. So you're going to find that in my list, I kind of like float towards this kind of stuff where you're utilizing real shark footage to mix in with whatever else you're trying to convey. And I'll talk a little bit more about this film because I'll tell you right now, this did make my top 8. So that's why I'm kind of surprised to see it here as high as it is. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, so that's cool. That's a good thing to note.
Film by a considerable distance. Dark Tide's weaknesses are primarily narrative. The human conflict between Barry and Olivier Martinez is more melodramatic than compelling, and the film's tonal inconsistency reflects the difficulty of combining a documentary-grade environmental sensibility with conventional thriller mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
The real sharks are more interesting than the fictional drama surrounding them,
True.
which is a problem the film never fully resolves. But the shark footage is the real thing, And in our view, that alone is sufficient to place Dark Tide on this list. Number 9, directed by Zeno Swark.
Now, if I were to have a top 10, Jaws 2 would be in the top 10. But again, for my sake of my own list, I only kept it the top 8. But chances are Jaws 2 would actually make my top 10 because I felt like it was an underappreciated sequel. Still gets corny at the end, but at the end of the fucking day, there's a lot of tension in this film, and it is a worthy sequel. You had your guy Brody coming back. The same, basically some of the same characters from the first film. So it still plays very, very heavily onto the reputation or excitement that Jaws brought, in 75. So the fact that they were able to like play off it, like, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, that was the tagline. So Jaws 2, again, I don't mind that it's in this list here. Obviously, there's a bunch of films that he's got in here. But for the sake of my own list, I only kept it at 8 original films. So, but cool that it's in here.
Jaws 2, 1978. The most successful and most credible of the 3 sequels, and a film that has been somewhat unfairly diminished by its proximity to a predecessor that no sequel could reasonably have been expected to match. Chief Brody, again played by Roy Scheider with the specific anxious competence that made him the right protagonist for the original, is faced with another shark in the waters off Amity, and with a town, a mayor, and a tourist economy that have no interest in hearing it. Swark does not attempt to replicate Spielberg's direction, which is the correct instinct, and the film's focus on the teenage at sea ensemble in its second half gives it a coherent identity of its own. Less a film about civic responsibility, and more a film about youth and survival. The shark attack on the helicopter is among the most memorable set pieces in the franchise. Its weaknesses are structural. The first half is more interesting as a meditation on trauma and institutional disbelief than as a setup for the teen survival thriller it becomes. And the tonal shift between the two halves is more abrupt than it should be. But Jaws 2 is a genuinely competent genre sequel that stands on its own terms.
True.
In our view, proximity to greatness has obscured a solid film, and a solid film deserves acknowledgement. Number 8, directed by John Turteltaub, The Meg, 2018. The Megalodon film that Hollywood had been failing to make for 20 years
film, just
finally
not a great
arrived
film.
in 2018 with a budget that matched the ambition and a cast centered on Jason Statham, which is the ideal casting decision for a film about a 60-foot prehistoric shark that everyone said was extinct. Turteltaub's direction is classical in the best sense. The geography of each set piece is established before the chaos begins. The scale of the Megalodon relative to its surroundings is consistently maintained, and the film's tonal commitment to cheerful self-awareness, without outright parody, keeps it in a register that most blockbusters struggle to hold. Li Bingbing provides a counterbalance to Statham's physicality with a performance of considerable charm, and the beach sequence, in which the Megalodon arrives in waters crowded with swimmers, and the film delivers on everything it has been promising, is staged with spectacular confidence. Its weaknesses are those of a franchise-minded production. Certain plot threads are introduced primarily to create sequel infrastructure, rather than to serve this film, and the midsection loses momentum in direct proportion to the time it spends in laboratories. But The Meg is exactly as much fun as it's set out to be. And in our view, that is a more difficult target to hit than it appears. Number 7, directed by Xavier Gens, Under Paris, Sous la Seine, 2024.
Bro, this film
The film that
sucks
demonstrated
so
more
bad.
convincingly than anything since Jaws itself
No.
that the shark movie has the capacity to become a genuine popular event rather than a genre exercise watched by genre audiences. Jens's Netflix production, set during a triathlon in the Seine, in which a mako shark that has mutated to unusual size and developed an adaptation for freshwater, begins hunting in the river that flows through the heart of Paris, became one of the most watched films on the platform in the weeks following its release. The film's success reflects something beyond algorithm and availability.
Well,
Gens, whose earlier work in the French extremity movement included Frontiers,
just to say, just because a lot of people tune in to watch something doesn't necessarily make it a good movie or a successful movie. Yes, it did gain some audiences to watch because people generally have a love for shark films. Like we have shark groups on Facebook and all that. Everyone joins in, but overall, like I don't think this is a very good movie at all. And like again, you have to kind of sustain belief sometimes when you watch films because they're always kind of going off the deep end somewhere in some way, shape, or form. This one really goes off the deep end. Not that I don't have films like that in my own list, but like it's all about how you create it, how it plays out with your actors, and the story within the story. So this one to me just didn't really work for me. I didn't really like it at all. It's actually a really bad film. And I think they actually got a sequel planned for it. So that's even more scary.
Brings a formal confidence and a willingness to commit to scale that the premise demands. The film does not pretend that its setup is scientifically plausible. It does not pretend about anything. And this clarity of intent gives it a particular energy that self-conscious genre films cannot manufacture. Its weaknesses lie in a screenplay that sacrifices character depth for narrative momentum, and a final act that some viewers will find more apocalyptic than the film has fully earned. But Under Paris is the shark movie that a generation of streaming audiences made into a cultural moment. In our view, that conversation is worth being part of, and Jens had the craft to deserve it. Number 6, directed by Johannes Roberts, 47 Meters Down, 2017. The most formally pure claustrophobia experiment.
Yeah, the one thing I will give this particular film is that it is unique in its own way. Like there's always been that fear that if you're going to go in a shark cage and observe sharks, what happens if the cage fails and you sink to the bottom. Not just because depending on where you are, let's say you're down somewhere where the drop is like very deep, like we've seen Shark Week and some of the episodes on there where sometimes they go way down. Like there was one episode in Shark Week, dude, where they went to see if they can find bigger great whites down towards the deep bottom. So like I forget how deep it was, but they went all the way down, dude, and they said like the sharks that were down there as opposed to near the surface were so much bigger, and they actually were. Those sharks were huge, and so it kind of made me wonder, like, why did the bigger sharks hang around that far deep? Are they going after squid, like sperm whales, or what exactly are they eating down there? Or is it just a place for them to kind of chill until they decide to go up for any kind of food? But the fear of like having your cage snap and then like really no way to get to you is crazy. But the other thing about this film is there is a subplot in some ways, I want to call it. I don't want to give it away because I think that's really kind of the best part of the film. It's not a great shark film for me, but as far as like originality and the plot design, I do like that a lot, which I thought was unique.
In the shark genre, a film that takes two sisters, two shark cages, and 47 meters of ocean between the surface and the seabed, and derives 90 minutes of sustained dread from that geometry without once allowing the audience to feel that the formula is being padded. Mandy Moore and Claire Holt play the sisters with a sibling chemistry that the film's survival logic demands. Two different approaches to panic, two different capacities for problem solving, one limited air supply. And Johannes Roberts directs the underwater sequences with a spatial clarity that transforms the familiar constraint of low visibility into an active instrument of terror. The shark attacks are earned rather than arbitrary. The film's understanding of when to show the shark and when to suggest it reflects a formal intelligence that most creature features lack. Its weaknesses are those of a film that keeps its focus so narrow that certain viewers will find the premise wearing thin in the second half, and the final act twist has divided audiences along lines of genre expectation rather than dramatic satisfaction.
Yeah.
But 47 Meters Down is the rare shark film that achieves genuine suspense through architecture rather than gore. In our view, The Cage, as setting and as concept, is one of the genre's finest dramatic environments. Number 5, directed by Chris Kentis, Open Water.
This isn't a bad film. I didn't see the second one, but the first one obviously also based upon true life events. But it didn't make my top 8. It possibly could make my top 10 if I really wanted to force it in there. But again, this is a little bit more about just surviving rather than the sharks themselves. The sharks are there, obviously a presence, but it's also just about the fear of being alone in the middle of the ocean. So there could be 100 different things to be afraid of in the ocean like that. But yeah, so this is a pretty decent film. I expected this to be on the list on some level. But yeah, let's see what he says about it.
2003. The most minimalist entry in the genre's canon, and the one that generates fear through subtraction rather than addition. A film that removes everything the blockbuster shark movie relies upon and discovers that what remains, bare and sufficient, is the most frightening element of the whole enterprise. A couple, played by Blanchard Ryan and Daniel Travis, are accidentally left behind during a scuba diving excursion in the Bahamas. They surface to find the boat gone and the ocean in every direction. And then they wait. Based on the true story of Tom and Eileen Lonergan, who disappeared from a dive group in 1998, Open Water is not a film about shark attacks. It is a film about the specific quality of terror that comes from being in a vast, dark, indifferent body of water with no rescue coming. The sharks, when they appear, are real. Kentis and producer Laura Lau filmed in open water with actual animals, using no digital augmentation, and their presence transforms the waiting into something more immediately urgent without diminishing the larger dread. Its weaknesses are those of a film of radical formal economy. Viewers who came for the Meg will find it refuses every expectation the genre established. But Open Water understands something the genre rarely acknowledges: that the shark is not the point, the ocean is, and it holds that understanding for its entire runtime without compromise. In our view, it is essential. Number 4, directed by Rennie Harlan, Deep Blue Sea, 1999. The film that asked a question the genre had not previously considered. What if the sharks were smarter than the scientists trying to study them? And answered it with such gleeful conviction that the result became one of the most rewatchable entries in the entire category. A marine research facility in the middle of the ocean has been conducting experiments on mako sharks, using their brain tissue to develop a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, a process that, as a side effect, has dramatically increased the shark's cognitive capacity. The sharks, it turns out, have been paying attention. Thomas Jane, LL Cool J, and Saffron Burrows lead a cast of characters who function, in the film's merciless logic, primarily as a counting mechanism, navigating an increasingly flooded facility against opponents who have been planning this longer than anyone admitted. Harlan directs with a propulsive efficiency that strips the film to its essential mechanics. Establish a character, establish the threat, deliver the consequence, proceed. The film's most celebrated sequence, in which it disposes of what appears to be its protagonist at the 40-minute mark, remains one of the great tonal sucker punches in genre cinema.
Yeah.
Its weaknesses are those of a film that prioritizes momentum over depth in every sense. But in our view, Deep Blue Sea is the most purely entertaining shark film ever made after Jaws. An entertainment this efficiently executed is its own form of mastery. Number 3, directed by Jaume Collet Serra, The Shout.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this. This film is actually good up until it gets toward the end, and it gets really ridiculous. And so my biggest issue with that is you set up your whole movie, your whole plot, where it is very much in a realistic setting, and realistic things happen, even not to her. And then all of a sudden it just goes off the rails and it loses itself. And you know, it's not the only movie to do that, even outside the shark genre, but it's just frustrating when you feel like, oh, I've got like a really, really good film here. and then it just decides to, like, the director just can't help themselves to fuck it over, like to ruin his own project. And so I really hate the fucking ending of this film. It takes away from everything, all the tension, all the great survivability that Blake Lively's character has in this. But I'm not shocked to see it in his list.
2016. The most formally accomplished shark survival film since Jaws. A film that takes a single location, a single performer, and a time constraint, and derives from those three elements a piece of spatial and dramatic filmmaking that the genre had not seen since the early 80s. Blake Lively plays Nancy, a medical student surfing alone at a remote Mexican beach who is attacked by a great white and finds herself stranded on a rock 200 meters from shore with the shark still between her and the beach. Cole Serra, a director whose genre work has consistently demonstrated more formal ambition than the action thriller category usually produces, treats the geography of the bay with a precision that functions as the film's primary dramatic engine. The distance to shore, the depth of the water, the timing of the tides, the structural integrity of the rock are all established with the care of a filmmaker who understands that survival cinema is an architectural problem. Lively carries the film entirely, and does so with a physical and emotional commitment the role demands, and she delivers without apparent effort. The shark's behavior is implausible by any biological standard, and the film does not care, which is the correct position. Its weaknesses are minor. A prologue that establishes character motivation more efficiently than elegantly, and a climax that tips slightly into the bombastic. But The Shallows is a very good film made by a director at the height of his genre intelligence. In our view, this is where the modern shark film stands at its best. Number 2, directed by Andrew Trocchi, The Reef, 2010.
Great
The most
selection.
frightening shark film ever made that is not called Jaws, a claim we make with full awareness of the films that follow and preceded on this list, and with the conviction that what Trocchi achieved with a minimal budget, a small cast, and the actual Coral Sea is something that more resourced productions have spent decades trying and failing to replicate. A sailboat capsizes off the coast of Australia, and 4 of the 5
This was
survivors
another one that was
make
based
the
off a real
decision to
life event
swim
too, as well.
for the nearest land, roughly 12 kilometers away. One survivor stays with the upturned hull. The film follows the swimmers. Based on a true event, The Reef is constructed around the specific terror of open water swimming, the darkness below, the weight of the distance, the understanding that the surface is the ceiling and everything below is unknowable, and the great white shark that begins following the group is almost a formalization of what the water already was. Trocchi filmed with real sharks in open water, and the sequences in which the animal is visible beneath the swimmers have a documentary quality that no constructed effect can match.
True.
Damian Walshy Howling leads the cast with a physical and emotional presence the film's demands require. Its weaknesses are those of an extremely lean film. The characterization is sufficient rather than rich. The first act establishes rather than immerses. But once the swimming begins, The Reef does not release its audience until it is finished with them. In our view, it is the most effective exercise in sustained shark-induced dread since the genre's defining work. Number 1, directed by Steven Spielberg.
Of course.
Jaws, 1975. There is no serious argument to be made for placing any other film at the top of this list. Not because Jaws is beyond criticism, which it is not, but because it invented the genre, set its standard, and has never been matched within it. And a ranking that placed anything else at number 1 would be making a contrarian argument rather than an honest assessment. Spielberg's film follows the police chief of a New England beach town, the marine biologist sent to help him, and the obsessive shark hunter they recruit as they attempt to kill a great white that has begun killing swimmers off Amity Island. The production was notoriously chaotic. The mechanical shark failed repeatedly, forcing Spielberg to suggest the animal rather than show it, a decision that produced more fear than the shark's actual presence could have generated. Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw form an ensemble whose chemistry in the film's final act, 3 men on a boat, waiting, is among the finest sustained character work in American popular cinema. John Williams's score is the most immediately recognizable musical shorthand for fear in the history of film. The film created the summer blockbuster as a commercial form. It made people afraid to swim. It changed cinema. In our view, Jaws is not just the greatest shark film ever made. It is one of the greatest films in any genre, operating at a level of craft
It's
and
true, because it
emotional
does
intelligence
go into
that the 50
drama, it does
years
go
since its
into
release have
thriller
done nothing to
territory, so it
diminish.
does a lot
That
of
is our
different
list.
things.
20 films, one genus of predator, and 50 years of cinema trying to understand what makes the shark such a durable vessel for human fear. The answer, as the best films here demonstrate, is that the shark is never really about the shark. It is about what the ocean represents, what the surface conceals, and what we become when the distance to shore is everything. Tell us in the comments which placement you would argue with. Subscribe to Movie Blanket Club. We will see you in the next one.
So yeah, so definitely they are called Movie Blanket Club. So if you want to go check out the original video yourself, you can. I'm going to get into my top 8. I was a little surprised by some of the stuff they have in there, and I was a little surprised at a couple that weren't in there, especially since they were covering so much ground in terms of like whether the shark is the focus or not. So I was a little surprised, but then again, you know, it's all about taste and your opinions and all that good stuff. But I'll start with number 8. The 7 and 8 are both more newer films, and they're, you know, again, if I had to say 6 through 8 aren't necessarily like my favorites of all time because of different reasons, but they're still like some of the best out there in terms of like my enjoyment from them and what they kind of represent. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to get too in deep about it because I don't want to drag this on forever. But at number 8, and I know that my boy Kevin Lambert from Entertainment Headquarters was very against this film. He did not like it. I'm talking about, of course, Netflix's Thrash. This does go into like bait territory, a little bit of deep blue sea. You got a town that gets flooded. But to me, what makes this film a little more unique is that, one, it touches on the idea that, one, you have realistically an idea of bull sharks that get into the river system and are creating a problem. So you're not just adding like a supersized smart mako into the mix or anything like that, or tornadoes. This actually plays. We've seen bull sharks in Ocean City when it floods, like swim through the city. Like we've seen this. So, and they've been up the Mississippi and everything else. So we know that bull sharks can live in both fresh and salt water. So the fact that this could happen is very much real. Now, there is a great white that also makes a way into this movie. But what I do like about that is that the great white is never the focus, and it actually is almost the hero or anti-hero of the movie. So I like that. And now, granted, people are going to say, well, great whites can't live in fresh water. Yes and no. The Matawan Creek attacks in New Jersey, 1916, there were pieces of a body from a human discovered in a shark that was caught out the mouth of the river by a couple of fishermen. And when they opened it, it had some body parts in there. Now, whether or not that belonged to any of the kids or the young, I think he was a tailor or something that went to try to save the kids in the river when they were being attacked, whether or not that was their body or not, or whether or not the great white had just come down because, you know, there were attacks along the coast before Matawan Creek. So there's a theory in one of the books I have called Close to Shore. There's a theory that a white shark could temporarily live in low salt and saline water. So going up a river mouth where the salt water is denser, they could technically survive, apparently. Maybe not for long. That's probably why the shark was caught back at the mouth of the river. Again, that's just theory because it could have came from the ocean side and just got caught in that mouth area. But, you know, there was no bull sharks caught or anything like that. The theory was it should have been a bull shark. They would have done that, which could have done that. But it's also possible a great white could have survived that. So the idea that this great white gets into this this flooded town. It's far-fetched, but it's kind of playing off this theoretic idea that a great white could technically survive a little while within those fresh waters. At number 7, recently saw this. Has a very much similar feel to Trum. It's not a serial killer, but certainly a gentleman who's running a boat. His wife was taken by a shark that he is basically hunting down now. And the idea is he's so distraught about losing his wife to this particular shark that he's gone from feeding animals to try to lure this shark in. He's almost like a Captain Ahab of the White Shark movies. So he's trying to lure this shark in to kill it, but then he resorts to feeding the shark humans because he feels like the shark is now attracted to human beings instead of like regular fish and stuff. So the plot is super thin. Acting is okay, but at the end of the day, the thing that I liked about Chum was, and I talked about this in my review if you want to check it out, is that when it comes to CGI and AI being used in film, I thought they did a really good job with that. So if you're not going to use real shark footage, the closer you can get to using like actual looking sharks, like we know the past with some of these other movies, white sharks do not look like white sharks. Even in Deep Blue Sea, when they show you that supposed tiger shark, it looks nothing like a tiger shark. Not at all. So the closer you can get to looking like the type of shark that it's supposed to be, the better the film will be. And the way that they had the kill scenes in there worked for me and for Chum. So I did really enjoy that for the film that it was. At number 6, Deep Blue Sea. Again, this film is just a lot of fun up and down. It is crazy in terms of like plot, but guys like LL Cool J steal the show. He's incredibly funny in this film. He's actually a very underrated actor overall. Obviously, he was a rapper, still a rapper, hip hop artist, but his acting really was showcased a lot, during those years. And so Deep Blue Sea kind of showcased that. But the shark film itself is really fun. I was actually really happy at the time to see another shark film in the theaters. Like it'd been kind of a while since I'd seen something that focused on sharks, and so that was really fun to watch that. And then, as the guy in the video said, there is a scene in there where one of our main characters bites it that we did not expect to bite it. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. So it was like a shock. It's almost as much of a shock as it was when you saw Executive Decision with Kurt Russell when they had Steven Seagal, and like within the first 10 minutes, Seagal's like dead. So it's kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh fuck, what the hell? Number 5. Now I was surprised to see this in the list, and I was surprised to see it as high as it was. We're actually going to break into my top 5, and I'm going with Dark Tide. And again, I did not realize they were using totally all real life shark footage, but this is what makes the movie work. So even if you're not seeing real life shark attacks, the idea that they've been able to kind of utilize that where the shark footage and then whatever they did for the actual shark attacks, it's like semi-blurred because most of the shark attacks happen when it's either dark, at night or whatever. But the film is good. The plot is not that thick. It doesn't have to be because it really, for me, it was about the real life shark footage and how they were able to incorporate that into the movie itself. So the characters are paper thin. You really don't care about anybody in this film, but the sharks are cool. And that's something I really like to play off of, because going into my number 4, I don't know why my voice is giving out. Going into number 4, this film is more about adventure. But at the same time, I was kind of surprised how much time they spent on the scenes with sharks. It's also based off a real life real life story. I'm talking about Kentucky. And, these guys, I forget what the actual plot was. It's been many years since I've seen this. But there's some scenes in there where they're trying to fish for food while they're on their raft. And they have like their makeshift shark cages they made up. I forget how they made them, but they dumped their cages in the water. And there's some great white sharks like swimming, like a lot of them swimming around them, because the more they fish, the more blood's in the water, and of course the sharks are out there. So I thought, especially at the time period, which would have been years ago when this happened, And so, like, you can kind of realize that at the time, shark fishing wasn't as big as it is now. So the more sharks out there would have been truly something you would see. So I thought that, I don't know if they were CGI. I'm pretty sure they were for the time that this film was made, but they did a good job in the CGI. It looked real, looked fun. The sharks looked amazing. So I really, really enjoyed that. Number 3, this film also, do I have it in here? Hold on. Sorry, guys. Didn't pull up my, where is it? Thought I had all my shit. Thought my shit was in here. All right. So number 3, again, this film is less about sharks, but it's more about like a heist film, almost. Like if you ever saw the movie The Deep, it's kind of like about treasure hunting. And I'm talking about a movie called Into the Blue with Paul Walker, the late Paul Walker, and Jessica Alba. But again, the sharks that are featured in this film, which actually happens a lot. There's actually a shark attack, which looks real enough. Real life sharks are using this. One thing that I learned after the fact of seeing this film is that Paul Walker was a big shark conservationist, and even on Shark Week, he was on the shark boats helping to tag great whites. Like, so I thought that was cool. So Paul had a lot of passions, including not just fast cars, but unfortunately, which took his life, but also sharks. So the shark footage in this is amazing. In fact, I was pretty sure Paul wasn't afraid to swim with the sharks, and maybe Jessica did too. I'm not sure if they all swam with the sharks or not, because I would have been kind of terrified to do that. But sure, I'm sure it was under controlled environments. But either way, the sharks play a factor in the sense that you're not only dealing with the dangers of your rivals trying to get to the same treasure, but you're now dealing with sharks that are causing a problem of guarding the waters there. So number 2, this actually is very interesting because it's the number 2 on this person's list, The Reef. This is a fantastic, very underrated shark film. I don't care what anybody says. It's not going to be something that's super exciting all the time, because it's really just about this group that gets stranded on their boat when it starts sinking, decide they're going to try to swim to like a small little inlet island or something out in the middle of the water. It was probably like a mile or 2, maybe a little bit more. I can't remember how far it was, but it's all about the dread. It's all about the tension. And as they're swimming, they keep realizing that they're being hunted by a great white. So occasionally, like, one of the guys will look in the water and you'll see the shark. And so they get very paranoid because they're all like, how big is it? He's like, big. And so it's very tension all the way to the end. And considering it's based off real life events, it's even more dramatic and traumatic, because the acting is done well enough. Obviously, there's like a side plot in the beginning with the girl and the guy, but by the end of it, man, you're just feeling bad for the final character. You're just like, oh my God, they had to kind of endure watching, their friends pass away like they did. But it's all about the tension and the atmosphere that this film creates, and it's all kind of based within a real life event. So again, I thought that I was really excited that he put that at number 2, because that's where mine was as well, and that hasn't changed. Number 1 doesn't shock anybody. Obviously, I saw this film when I was 5 years old at the drive-in with my babysitter or my mom. I can't remember which one took me that night. I'm pretty sure of my babysitter, but yeah. So I went to see Jaws, and it terrified me. I told my babysitter, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm tough. I can watch this film. And I had a nightmare that night. And it's one of those films that sticks with you for sure. So great film, great cast, based on, the Monauan Creek, New Jersey attacks. Just overall, probably the best shark film you'll ever see. And as you kind of pointed out, it's probably one of the best films ever made, just with character dynamics, plot. It's not really a straight horror film. It's more like a thriller, sometimes an action film. So Jaws really covers a lot of ground for what it is. And of course, you can see I've got the orca, and this is actually the new Jaws game. So I had the original back in the 70s when I was a kid, And so they re-put out this game where you pull out the pieces, and then if you're not careful, the shark closes its jaws. But of course, now the shark looks far more realistic, which I thought was always great. So obviously, I went and bought it. And of course, this was my mother-in-law's. She has this diorama of the orca jaws at the back, of course. Amazing thing that she gave me. I love her to death for that because I've been begging her for years to give it to me. But yeah, so that's it, man. Those are my top 8 films. I will put in my description a couple links to some, I won't say articles, but I did some videos. One on Simon Nellis, his attack in Sydney in 2022. And then Vladimir Popov, who got attacked by a tiger shark in Egypt, I think, in 2023. So I have footage that I got of those attacks. Now, I'm not here to brag that I have the footage. As I say in the videos, it's more of an educational thing because I give my opinions about why those attacks happened. And that I'm not really celebrating what happened, but only that, like, I try to make people aware of the dangers of being in the water. And, you know, we oftentimes say, you know, we humans are the dominant species on the planet, which in some ways we are intellectually, but technically nature is actually in control of things. And so when you're in the water, sharks are going to be there. There's sharks there even when you're swimming out in the ocean and you don't think they're there. Whether or not they attack you is about a minimal chance, but when it does happen, there's reasons why. But either way, I'll have those links in there as well as my original top 5, which isn't different except for maybe a couple in here now of my top 5 from back then. But either way, thanks for watching. Give me your opinions, your comments. Let me know what you feel about this and the video top 20, how you would rank something. Is there any shark movies you think that I would like, kind of like in my list, that maybe I've overlooked? Let me know. And I'll see you next time on the Meltdown Radio podcast. Take care.
Never could go